will be going on and discussing about Democracy Day. Today is June 12th, and we'll be heading on to exploring the retrospective analysis of Nigeria's democratic journey. We'll look at a reflective look on the journey in democracy, its gains, its setbacks, transition and survival. And here with us in the studio is a guest who has lived and studied this journey. He is no other than Professor Al-Qasim Abba. Professor Abba is a historian and political analyst who will help contextualize what this moment means for Nigeria's democracy. At this hour, we explore how far we've come and what lessons we must take forward. You are highly welcome, sir. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
All right.
For inviting me.
Professor, good to see you again.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. As we all know, today is Democracy Day, is June 12th, and as we've known, Democracy Day was celebrated on May 29th, and due to the fact that it is in commemoration, June 12th is in commemoration of the election that took place on June 12th in 1993. How can you elaborate on what was then and what is now in the democratic landscape?
What do you mean by then and now?
During that particular time in 1993, when that election went on, how can you compare it to the democracy that goes on now and the elections that go through now?
Okay, I think in the first place, they are not comparable because I often say that June 12th is not as democratic as people talk about it, because you do not take one aspect of the democratic process and magnify it and turn it into the democratic process. Because June 12th, only people concentrate talking about the conduct of the election and looked like to be free and fair. But nobody seemed to be putting into account the process that produced June 12th was very undemocratic. In the first place, the Nigerian population were not allowed to establish their parties. When the transition program was announced, 38 parties emerged. Out of 38, 13 sent their application for registration at NEC, and none of them was registered. And so what happened? The military government decided to give us parties, together with party names, together with manifesto of parties, being approved by the Armed Forces Ruling Council. So what is democratic about this whole process? There's nothing democratic about this process.
So it wasn't a product of the people?
Not only that, even the party leaders were appointed by government at every level, upward level. And the one of SDP, which conducted the June 12 election, was headed by Air Vice Marshal Isha Shekar. So you have this whole facade that people seem to think that June 12 was the freest and fairest. June 12 is the product of perhaps the most undemocratic political process in the history of Nigeria. So parties were formed by government, manifestos were imposed by government, party structures, and they built, federal government built party headquarters for the two parties in the 21 states of the federation. Then the military governors built local government offices in the local governments. So the parties were really government-owned property.
So if I understand your position, Professor, it was a controlled kind of transition, and beyond that, it was restricted. It wasn't, that democratic, because there was no choices for those who were, the players.
It wasn't naturally occurring. whereby it was tailored in order for it to go in a particular trajectory instead of it to be, for the people as it's supposed to be.
Yes, whatever it is aimed at achieving, it is very clear that it is the most controlled and undemocratic process. So when a process is undemocratic, the outcome cannot be the freest and fairest election. In Nigeria, that is the reality. But I say June 12th is just a political issue rather than a democratic election issue, because it is the annulment of the results that made June 12th important. That those who are opposed to Abiola, like Chibola Ige, Antonio Enahoro, all these our people who are opposed to Abiola, they are abusing him. As soon as the June 12th was annulled, they rallied around him. And many of them, the implication they had was they parochialized June 12th. I remember around that time, I went to Lagos. I was going to Badagry. I took a taxi, and the driver said, "You Northerners, you don't want Yoruba to become president." I said, "No, it's not us. It's your Yoruba people who said that. Who is Abiola to become president of Nigeria when Chief Awolowo failed to become one?" And he said, And I was holding, there's a pamphlet we wrote for Abiola, Chief M.K. Abiola and the Peace and Unity of Nigeria. Our center, Sadat in Zaria. We wrote it for him. We translated into Hausa. We translated into Hausa Ajami, and we distributed across the country. All I had in my bag, I brought it out. I said, "Look at what we have done for Abiola." And I challenged him. I said, "You only voted for Abiola. I have done more than voting for Abiola."
Do you believe that created a ripple effect when it comes to ethnic rivalry and ethnic politics as well in Nigeria?
Well, it is not exactly ethnic politics. You see, the British calculated very well. When they saw that a pan-Nigerian political party called the NCNC was emerging, just like CPP, Convention People's Party in Ghana, or the Congress Party in India, which was uniting all the elites.
More of a national party.
For a national. In India, what they did was, when they realized it was, and they had lost India in 1947, they decided to create problem for India by splitting the members of the Congress Party along religious lines, and they created Pakistan. And they said this is just for Muslims. So Indian nationalism as a unity of all the people was broken. And unfortunately for them, there was nothing they could do in the case of Gold Coast, Ghana, which they became the first country to become independent under British control in Africa in 1957. So the British were careful. When they realized the NCNC was emerging as a pan-Nigerian political party, what did they do? They divided it. And that is when they introduced what they called the Richards Constitution of 1946. And the aim of this constitution is to divide Nigerian politicians and divide Nigerian politics. So that instead of Nigerian politicians looking at Nigeria as a whole, Nigerian politicians were made to look at their regions rather than Nigeria. Nigeria became secondary. Their regions became first. And we have grown into this regional worldview since 1946. And this is why when there was problem June 12th, Awolowo people and so on, it just happened that they were Yoruba, but it's just regional politics.
Yeah, talking about the regionalization of our polity, but then some are also given a credit to that election for bringing Nigerians together, so to speak, especially of the northern extraction, because what happened was the northerners at that point in time rejected their own, so to speak. But Bashir Toba was from Kano, but right in his constituency, he lost the election to MKO Abiola. What was the reason behind that? Was it that Nigerians at that point in time were not looking at this regional fault lines? Why did it happen at that point in time?
Yes, I will say that you yourself you are the one also giving it regional interpretations.
Okay.
That the Northerners, because the Northerners have supported Abiola, are they not members of SDP? Why are people giving regional interpretation to even votes? Because they are members of SDP. They decide to support SDP. It's not that Tofa is not their son, but he's not a member of their party. And
but
they didn't want to
SDP wasn't the
support
dominant party in the north then. I mean, in particular in Kano.
Yes. As the people decide not to vote for them.
Okay.
So I don't want you to start thinking that they didn't vote for Tofa, they voted for Abiola, and Tofa is their brother. What makes Tofa their brother better than Abiola? It's just that we are giving regional perspective, regional interpretations, which the British wanted us to do since 1946. You know, I interviewed Sagawam Bear. He was the last colonial governor for northern Nigeria in 1990 in London. And because I had seen in some documents that they wanted to create northern Nigeria as a country, and they had even had routes, highway will lead us to the sea, and they were going to make Lagos independent of Western Nigeria, like Hong Kong, as an independent city-state, like Singapore. They were going to do it. But then I didn't see anything. So I asked Sagan Bey, why did he not create northern Nigeria as a country? He laughed. He said, yes. We realized one thing. We wanted northerners to look towards Lagos. You know, when northern region was under Sardauna and Mahmoud Ribadu became friends to Gamal Abdel Nasser.
Egypt.
And Nasser was fighting the British over Suez Canal, over so many things. So suddenly they realized that if northern Nigeria becomes a country, it will look towards the Middle East. And he was very frank with me. So we decided that we should make you look towards Lagos, not the Middle East. And this is the situation that the British preoccupation, even after they have left, is to force us to think the way they want us to think. So and unfortunately, we are still thinking the way the British want us to think.
So it's a situation of divide and conquer.
Yes.
But is it the fault of theirs? Because if they do this, and willingly, we are also submitting ourselves to these post-colonial tendencies, yes. Then who is to be blamed? If we don't have leaders who think inward, and be able, we are beginning to see this happening elsewhere in Africa. You know, the rise of leaders who begin to think Africa and Pan-Africanism. Why is that lacking in Nigeria?
Well, it's lacking because we are still playing parochial politics. You know, the regional, since 46, 56, 66, 20 years, they are doing regional politics. And when the soldiers came and took over 66, when the military came, the military were the ones who tried to make us become Nigerians. And for the first time in 1979, they said that you cannot form a regional party, a sectional party. You have to form a Nigerian party. You have to have officers in the states. You should have members. Your party leaders should be this, and so on and so forth. So that to make us look more Nigerian than regional. And you know, still because those who came up in 1979, who are they? They were the regionalists. Awolo, for Action Group, Shagari, MPC, Zik, NCNC. Count them. What do you call it? Waziri Ibrahim, even Mala Amin Kano, NEPU, Northern Element Progressive Association. So it is still because the politicians' preoccupation and worldview is regional.
But the same...
And you people in the media, you also promote that, unfortunately.
But there's the same narrative around, you know, some say they made the country united, or they centralize, if you like, the government and make sure everything is unitary in nature, just to also satisfy their, you know, personal, I mean, their penchant for corruption, so to speak. The resources of the country were sort of been pilfered under their watch. That is the reason behind decentralization of virtually everything, so that they can easily administer and, of course, take advantage.
No, I don't think so. I think part of the reason why the military tried to insist that we become Nigerian outlook because of the consequences of regionalism, which led to the first military coup. Then, you know, the coup was organized by officers from the eastern region. They killed civilian politicians and military officers from the northern and western regions, whose governments were in alliance, and so on and so forth. This is what degenerated. But the soldiers, you know, when they come, they were recruited as northerners. But when they join the army, they are Nigerian soldiers. Loyalty to Nigeria. They have no loyalty to any region. And that is why the soldiers try to transform as civilians to become like them, to become more Nigerian than regional in outlook.
Well, but then, still looking at the fact that the essence of democracy, perhaps, is to provide, the greatest good to the greatest number. It's about the people. And today, the consensus is that the majority of the people have been marginalized in terms of resource distribution, in terms of, even providing governance has now become, to take from your word, parochial in its, trajectory. Why are we here? If exactly, if the military had wanted us to be united, to think Nigeria and look towards Nigeria as a state and not our regional configurations.
No, the problem is that the military are not politicians. So when they come, they are an interventionist force, and they had to leave. And they knew that it was temporary. They had to leave. So when they set things into motion, they leave. And when they leave, we go back to our old ways of behaving.
Okay.
Is that not so?
Right.
Eh?
But then from 1999, when we were back into the Fourth Republic, do you believe that as Nigeria's democracy is going, we would get to a better place whereby it is all serving to the people as it's supposed to be?
Let's hope it will happen. Because what we see, or what I see as a historian, is that there has been progressive decline in the governance system from 1999 up to now. Every government is worse than its previous. This one now is worse than Buhari government. Buhari was worse than the others. It's like a progressive decline in terms of the quality of leadership that this country is having.
So what are the factors? Because fundamentally Nigerians will want to know, why are we degenerating? Why are we retrogressing rather than progressing? And we're counting years of democracy, 26 years of unbroken democracy.
Maybe it has to do with the nature of the democracy that we have.
Okay.
First of all, we don't have parties based on any ideology. All the parties are the same. You cannot say this is APC, this is PDP, this is this. And when you are in the government, you do what the others cannot do. Like in the Second Republic, I was a member of the PRP, and we brag to say that we can do things which the NPN cannot do at those state levels. But there is nothing now. Flat. And it is all money politics. So people steal public money, use it to steal public votes, and use it to get into government. It's a vicious cycle that we are in. And I hope that the political class would have to realize that this kind of thing cannot continue.
So in other words, you believe there should be, even the elites themselves, the political elites should have a consensus among themselves to say, let's do the right thing so that we can continue on this trajectory.
Yes, if you want to protect yourself as a ruling class, you are not the only ones who should eat. It must drop down. If you keep on eating alone, the others are starving, you are in trouble too. They are not the only ones who are in trouble. It's just like I see now that they said governors have declared for Tinubu, this or that. I said, it's just madness. Apart from the fact that Lume mentioned that 22 governors declared for Jonathan, yet he failed the election. But because what you now see is that people who have stolen public money as governors, they are looking for protection. So they ran quickly and joined the APC. How long will this continue? Only God knows.
But who will bear the card, for instance, if the ruling elites are grouping, based on the fault line that they are the ones enjoying the resources, and then the ordinary people are marginalized? Do they have, how can this distortion be addressed as we move towards perhaps the next election?
Fortunately, not all the members of the ruling elite have grouped into APC. There are still some opposed to.
Well, it did say that they are one and the same. There is no ideology.
Yes, but you see, historical circumstance now will have to force people to adjust. You can't come and tell me you want to replace Tinubu. Okay, what are you offering us? Which Tinubu is not offering us. So you have to tell us. So I think that this circumstance is forcing them to begin to come with ideas of what to do.
But is that what we're seeing today? Because there's much talk about, coalition, political parties, politicians of like minds coming together to say, well, we are, ready to change the narrative. We are coming together to salvage the country. But many believe it is just for power grab's sake, not necessarily providing an alternative. And again, people are also looking at the same set of people that have participated in the previous, administrations and took part in the previous governments and even play a role, now coming together to say they are the ones that will champion, the change that Nigerians want. Is it a possibility?
Yes, I think it is possible for people to change. I don't think we should be rigid to say that, oh yes, they are all the same. We need to be flexible, to give people benefit of doubt, and also to realize that the political situation, the economy is very, very bad. Nobody can continue to live under this terrible starvation situation. And I think that even those who want to change it, there is no way they can just take over the leadership and continue doing the same thing with these people. It's not going to be possible.
But then do you believe that the lack of, should I say, progressive competition between, as you said earlier, it used to be a competitive scene in making sure that you give back positively to, the people as you should. Do you believe that the lack of that is what's making our democracy and the system deteriorate like it is, and that selfish mentality that our politicians do have in this day and age, where, as you said, there are no ideologies and there's no trajectory or
pathway.
Yeah, exactly, pathway in which they would want to make Nigeria better again, and no patriotism.
Yes, and I think that it is true that way. What we have been focusing instead of some kind of ideological politics is to look at what people used to say, decent people. Buhari used to be selling this, yes, it's the incorruptible in this and that. And then when he became president, it turned out to be a different affair. So nobody can now start believing an individual savior for the country. So it cannot be an individual now. It has to be organizational, structural, political.
So in this respect, what do you make up with our institutions? Because it seems to be we are building individuals rather than building institutions, and nations don't thrive if they don't have strong institutions. Today, the conversation is that, institutions have been hijacked. There's much talk about state capture. How do we change this narrative?
Well, you have to change the politics in order to change the narrative. When the politics has not changed, it will continue this way. But nothing is permanent. I don't want anybody to think that this situation will continue. It will not continue. it will have to give way.
So who will engineer the change?
Only God knows. As a historian, I will tell you that change will come in a way that you have not even envisaged. You didn't even imagine it will happen that way. And big change needs to happen only once. I used to say that in Venezuela, you know Chavez?
Hugo Chavez.
Hugo Chavez. He was just a military officer. They tried to organize a coup to take over the government. And everywhere succeeded except the capital, Caracas, where he was in charge. Then he was arrested and told them, okay, give me 10 minutes on the radio, television. I'll tell my colleagues to surrender so that we don't fight and kill ourselves. And they gave him. He went to the radio studio and said, my fellow countrymen, we have tried to change this country and we have failed now. And he made this, people never heard of him. They never saw him. Then that's how his name started spreading. And his colleagues surrendered. He was jailed, I think 2 years or so. When he came out of jail, he came with a political party, with a manifesto, with everything. And he contested the election and won. Nobody imagined that something like this would happen. That's a country where the elites used to negotiate. For 60 years, two parties, they will negotiate. This time, you take the presidency, we take this number of senators, and we take this number of house. And they were doing it every election after election for 60 years before it just collapsed.
It's akin to what we are having in Nigeria, for
Absolutely,
instance, the rotational presidency
that, yeah.
and so on. But many believe
rotational presidency is not democratic. You can't come and tell me that. You see, that is why it doesn't exist in our constitution. Yeah. It is only, even in the parties, it's only the PDP had it in its own constitution. They wrote. You can't talk about democracy. You talk about rotation. What are you going to rotate? It's the people who will decide who they want to govern them. So it's not, that's why even the PDP has collapsed.
But some say, it's a bane. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we have an internal wranglings within the parties. For instance, the same PDP you're talking about, many believe the genesis of the crisis was the fact that the party has jettisoned at some point this gentleman arrangement. And some people felt, should change. No, it is not a gentleman's arrangement. It's in their constitution. Right. It is the NPA that made it a gentleman's arrangement. But PDP is there in their constitution. Okay. Rotation between north and south. No other party has it. Yes. But because they thought they contained everybody. You see, when Obasanjo came in 1979, he realized one thing, that the instability of the elite caused instability to the government. So what did he do? He then set up a government of national unity. I interviewed him, I can't remember which year, and he said when he told his party he was going to have a government of national unity, they said, we don't bloody care. Give us our 36 ministers. So, and they collected their 36 ministers. But then he went around appointing people who are not members of the party, like Bola Ige and so on and so forth, into the government. Because he realized that leave these politicians outside doing nothing, they will conspire, they will create a lot of problems. So he tried to bring them all together. But you see, this whole idea collapsed after Obasanjo. Not only that, he didn't do only that, all the families of aggrieved political leaders, Ironsi's family, they were brought into the government. Ojuku's family was brought into the government. Murtala's family were brought into the government. Try to see if he could unite the elites together. But this whole thing collapsed after Obasanjo. No, he told me, his first cabinet, he knew only 6 ministers. He said, I see person, I say, who is his name? He said he knew only 6 ministers in his government because the party was appointing the ministers. And so when you begin to isolate a large number of politicians, you are also not only isolating your government, isolating everything in your in the system.
But then, Prof, I'd like to get your take on this. It's always been said that in Nigeria, after, you know, the first tenure, a person can get a second tenure, which culminates to 8 years in office. A lot of people are saying that this gives a lot of leeway for the politicians to, you know, do as they please. Do you believe that having a restricted term will make sure that they do what they need to do and then they move on, instead of being recycled as it is going on now?
Well, you know, this is the problem of the presidential system. It normally has got a term limit. Under parliamentary system, it doesn't have the term limit. But the quality of control of the prime minister and the government is high in the parliamentary system. When the backbenchers revolt, they will join the opposition and collapse the government, and so on and so forth. But this does not exist in the presidential system. So election and re-election are part of the governance system of the presidential system.
But proponents of this line of thoughts, you know, also believe that it is essential to restrict the term to maybe a one term, either 5 years or 6 years, just like is being postulated. Idea is to reduce waste. I mean, because there's so much spendings in terms of organizing periodic elections after 4 years. You know, Nigeria spent huge amount of money to conduct another round of election, and it is becoming a norm. I mean, politicians have been personalizing this. You know, I have an 8-year tenure that I have to finish. Even if I'm not able to deliver on the first mandate, I have to go for the second mandate and all of that. And then it also gives a sense of, I mean, distract them from real governance. Because as soon as they get there, what they're thinking is the next election. Didn't you think it is necessary to tinker with this arrangement by a constitutional amendment?
I am not quite sure the terms themselves matter so much in a democratic society. See, the problem we have is that because our system is not democratic. If it is democratic, you don't have to worry, because whether you are president or you are governor, the system controls you. But because the system is not democratic, you know, when Obasanjo became president, he was the president, he was the commander-in-chief, he was the party leader of the PDP, you know, so he was everything. And that when, for example, he had differences with what do you call it, Audu Ogbe, Chief Audu Ogbe, he sacked him as party chairman. So when the president transformed himself into an absolute dictator and the system allowed it to happen, then it becomes a problem. Even if you give him one term, and then you are just replacing one dictator with another one.
Right.
All right, I believe this should cut us short, and we've come to an end. We really appreciate you, Prof, for being here, giving us a little bit of history of what Nigeria used to be, and you know, how we expect it to be, hopefully, in the future. Thank you very much for being here. We highly appreciate it.
Thank you.